Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dave. We're the IB English guys. We've been working with the Revision Village, and we just finished a higher level essay bootcamp. In this bootcamp, we take you through the entire process of writing your higher level essay with lots of videos and sample papers. So make sure you create a free account on Revision Village and check out this resource. We also have a video about critical lenses.
Yeah, critical lenses are a great way to help you explore literature at a deep level. We have that in the Higher Level Essay Bootcamp. We wanted to offer this video for you for free on our channel as well. We think it's a great way to help you out. Be sure to check this out. Yeah, the first lens we want to look at is the feminist lens, and the feminist lens explores the female experience of the world. We want to think about our female characters and how they experience the world, how they're treated by others, and how they feel about themselves.
Yeah, the feminist lens also examines power and the power dynamics that exist between genders, and we want to think about that.
Some questions to ask when using the feminist lens include, how are females in the work treated? So how are other characters interacting with the female characters? Are they treating them fairly? Are they repressing them? What is the relationship between the characters?
Yeah, we can also think about goals and aims that female characters have in these particular texts. What kind of makes them tick?
Lastly, we can think about, to what extent do women assert independence or agency? Are they limited by the patriarchy, or have they reached out, broken free, and asserted agency of their own?
Yeah, so that's a starting place for a great lens to really think about. The next lens we can examine is the historical and cultural lens. We can think about the context. So we're thinking about, with that lens, we're thinking about the history and context of the work at the time in which it was produced.
We can also think about the cultural values and the belief system of the work as well. How does culture impact the characters' lives and their behaviors, and what values drive interactions between characters?
Yeah, excellent. Now we want to think about some questions that we can ask. I like to think of literature or text as being time capsules. So, how is this text a representation of the time and place? This is one of our areas of exploration in our course.
We can also ask ourselves, which institutions hold power and authority? Is it a political entity? Is it the church? Is it the state? Who holds the power, and what is the effect?
Yeah, the last question we could ask about social hierarchy. How does this text portray the different social hierarchies that existed during that historical or cultural time period?
Another lens we can think about is the psychoanalytic lens. And in this case, we're thinking about the unconscious and the repressed of our characters. How does their psyche drive their interactions and behaviors?
Yeah, that's great. Now we're also thinking about the psychological and emotional states of characters, and we're thinking about their minds and how they're affected.
Questions to ask ourselves when using the psychoanalytic lens is, we can ask ourselves, how does the text explore aspects of mental health? We could think about anxieties or fears and how this drives character.
That's great. We could also think about subliminal or repressed thoughts that characters might have and how that's affecting their actions.
Lastly, we could think about different relationships among our character and how their psyche is driving these relationships. Again, thinking about those anxieties and fears between characters.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite lenses. The next lens is the post-colonial lens. And the post-colonial lens is really thinking about literature outside of that white Anglo-Saxon tradition.
It considers the representation of colonial countries and people. So we want to think about the colonizer and the colonized and how that's impacting the novel.
Yeah, some questions to ask is, how does the text portray the effects of colonization, imperialism, and how are those effects represented?
We can also think about the concept of the other, and we can ask ourselves, how does the text construct or resist the idea of the other? How is the other represented? These are the marginalized people of a text.
Yeah, we can also think about tensions and conflicts that exist between traditional culture and that colonial culture, and how those tensions really are perpetuated.
Lastly, we can think about the Marxist lens. Of course, this is attributed to Karl Marx, and in this case, we're thinking about the conflict between the privileged and the working class and the relationship between these two groups.
Yeah, right. We can also think about how the text might critique the social and economic systems that exist in the text.
When thinking about the Marxist lens, we want to think about power once again, and we want to ask ourselves, who holds the power and who is oppressed in this work?
Yeah, we can oftentimes think about economics and money, and think about how economics and money is really shaping characters' lives.
When we think about the power dynamic and the oppressor and the oppressed, we can also think about revolution. And does the text suggest the possibility of revolution or resistance?
Okay, so now that we've covered the 5 lenses, we want to very briefly talk about a novel and look at these lenses and how that can help us unlock things. We've chosen The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This is a post-colonial Indian novel. It's fantastic. It's very layered. The first lens we can look at is the feminist lens. We can think about how Roy is really criticizing the patriarchal gender norms in post-colonial India. She's thinking about how the female characters are marginalized and stigmatized.
We can also apply the historical and the cultural lens to the God of Small Things as well. In this case, we want to think about India's cultural traditions, specifically the rigid caste system, and how this shapes characters' identities and limits their possibilities.
We can take the psychoanalytical lens and think about this idea of trauma and childhood trauma in particular, and how that really affects the human psyche and affects the characters for their entire lives.
Of course, being a post-colonial novel, we can use the post-colonial lens to think about the God of Small Things. So we think about that post-colonial Indian identity and the many references to Western literature and film throughout the novel, and how sort of the othering of the Indian characters drives the action and the plot.
The last lens is the Marxist lens. We know that Arundhati Roy is a critic of capitalism, and we see how she's really talking about the class divisions and the economic and class inequalities that existed in the novel, and how that's really reinforcing oppression.
So in the end, we hope going through these critical lenses and using the God of Small Things as an example helps you achieve greater depth, insight, and understanding when examining your literary work.
Thanks, guys.